The door hadn't opened yet, but it would. You knew when. A few seconds, maybe less. The engine sound had changed. The boat had slowed, and that slowing, that small shift, pressed something tight in your gut, right in the center of your stomach, just below your chest. You couldn't name it, but it was there. The man next to you vomited. Third time. The first time, he'd been embarrassed. Turned his face away. Mumbled something like an apology. The second time, less so. Now, nobody even looked. Because everyone was busy with their own thing. Everyone was trying to hold down their own stomach, their own breath, their own hands. The sea was rough. It had been rough since 4 a.m. The boat rose and fell. Up, down, up, down. Every drop, salt water hit your face. Every rise, your stomach climbed into your throat. Some guys had tried to sleep. Nobody slept. Nobody really thought they would. It was just something to do with the time. But now the engine had slowed, and you knew what that meant. Your hand moved to your rifle. It was there. It was always there. But you reached for it anyway. Because your hands needed something to hold on to. Cold metal. Something real. Right now you needed things that were real. The door hadn't opened yet, but it would. And you were waiting with the full weight of knowing that. Your name wasn't Thomas. Or maybe it was. Didn't matter anymore. Because here, you weren't a name. You were a number. A position in a line. A slot. Infantry. Second wave. Omaha. 3 words that summed up the last 8 months of your life. You were from Ohio. Or Iowa. Maybe Indiana. Cornfields. Flat horizon. Bone-cold winters. Suffocating summers. The kind of place where time moved slow on a Tuesday afternoon. Small town. The kind where everyone knew you, and you knew everyone. The guy at the grocery store knew your name. You had a spot at church. The neighbors even knew your dog. You were 19, or 20, or 22. Age didn't matter here, but age was everything at the same time. Because the Army had no age. You were old enough to fight, but you were too young to leave your family. You existed somewhere between those two things. And sometimes that gap felt very narrow. Before the draft, your life was something else entirely. Maybe you worked the farm, up before sunrise. Animals didn't wait. Rain or frost didn't matter. That work had a tiredness to it, but that tiredness had an end. You came home in the evening. There was a meal, a table, people. Or maybe you were at a gas station. Cars pulled in, pulled out. Customers talked, sometimes didn't. Radio playing. In the afternoons, the sun warmed the glass of the station windows, and you felt that warmth on your back. Then, the letter came. That letter. The one everybody knew. How many guys from your town had gotten the same one? You didn't know, but you knew the ones who left. Some were neighbors. Some you knew from school. The grocery store owner's son went. The butcher's oldest kid, too. Training was in England. 8 months. Up at 5. Run, climb, crawl, drive, sleep, get up again. Officer voices. Commands. The same movements over and over until you stopped thinking about them. Until your body just did them. Until your hand was already on the rifle before your brain even caught up. It had worked. By the end of training, you were running on autopilot. Everything automatic. But your body was shaking now. And they never taught you that part. June 6th, 1944. 6:14 in the morning. You knew the date. You knew the time. Because the officer had said it. Said it at the briefing, standing over the map while everyone stood around him. Normandy coastline, codename Omaha, first and second wave. Beach approximately 300 meters. First barbed wire, then stakes, then the minefield, then concrete bunkers up on the high ground. Germans were in those bunkers. Machine guns were in those bunkers. Mortars. And those guns, those weapons, had a range that went far beyond 300 meters. You knew that too. When the officer said it, his voice didn't change. He spoke in a flat tone, like he was reading off a list. Flat voices were sometimes the most terrifying, because flat meant this is real. No dramatizing, no weight added for effect, just the facts. And the facts sometimes hit harder than anything dramatic. The map had markings. Red markings showed enemy positions. Blue markings showed the objectives. And between those two colors, in that 300-meter gap, there were small arrows. Those arrows were you. They were the man next to you. They were the guy across from you. They were all of you. Just an arrow. A small arrow pointing toward shore. That's what you were. That's what you all were. There were 42 men in the boat. Or 44. Maybe 38. You hadn't counted in the dark. But it was full. Shoulder to shoulder. Rocking together. And everyone carried the same weight. 45 kilos. Rifle. Ammunition. Gas mask. Medical supplies. Rations. Extra socks. Extra socks. When they said that, somebody laughed. Short, tight, nervous. The officer looked up. Silence. Then the officer kept going. If your feet stay wet, you can't walk. If you can't walk, you can't fight. Keeping your socks dry is as important as staying alive. And that was true. It was practical, cold, true information. But it stuck in your head. Extra socks. Right there next to everything that mattered. Life and extra socks. Being sent off on the last journey and extra socks. History and extra socks. Now, waiting in the boat, extra socks came to mind. Why? You didn't know, but they did. And that absurdity, that ridiculous little detail, held you there for a moment. In reality. In the present. Maybe that was the point. And the man next to you had told you his name. Back in England. One long night. After the barracks lights went out, in those hours when everyone pretended to be asleep but wasn't. He'd talked quietly. Jimmy. Or Billy. That kind of name. Small town name. Familiar. He'd talked. About home. About a meal his mother used to make. He didn't say the name of the dish. Just said, one more time would be enough. One sentence. But that sentence said everything. You'd talked about something too. You couldn't remember exactly what, but you'd said it. A place, a person, a feeling, and saying it was enough. Having someone listen was enough. That night you slept. Now Jimmy or Billy was standing next to you. The boat was shaking. You were both shaking. But you weren't looking at each other. Because some moments, looking took too much. And that moment was already more than anything could ask. You were just side by side. And that was enough. The engine stopped completely. When that moment came, you realized you weren't ready. 8 months of training. 8 months of preparation. 8 months for this exact moment. Briefings over maps. Photos of the beach. Lists of German commands. How to use medical supplies. How to spot mines. Everything for this moment. But when the engine stopped, a hollow opened up inside you. You weren't ready. Could anyone ever be ready? You didn't have time to ask that question, because the engine had stopped. When the engine stopped, the next thing was the door opening. When the door opened, the next thing was stepping into the water. After stepping into the water, the next thing was you didn't think about the next thing. The officer shouted. He didn't need to. Everyone knew what to do. Every movement was memorized. But the officer shouted because sound was needed. Sound meant existing. Existing meant moving. And moving meant not stopping. Stopping was dangerous. The boat hit something. Sand. An obstacle. Something. The metal hull became sound. And the vibration of that sound came up through the soles of your feet, traveled through your legs, and reached your chest. and with a grinding metallic pull, the ramp mechanism engaged. 1 second. Less than 1 second. The door opened. The light hit you first. Morning light. Gray, pale, foggy morning. It was the 6th of June, but the sky looked like winter. Heavy clouds. Low horizon. And that light, for eyes used to the darkness inside the boat, was blinding. For 1 second you couldn't see. Then the sound came. The sound covered everything. It wasn't an explosion. An explosion would be singular, large. It would start and end. This was different. This was constant, unbroken, coming from every direction, above, right, left, from the sea, from the air, from everywhere. Like you'd stepped inside the sound itself. Like sound was the space, and you were inside it. It was the sound of war, and nothing could have prepared you for it. The first men jumped through the door. Some fell forward. Some pushed ahead. Some froze where they stood. Some yelled. Some were silent. You were moving toward the door. You were in line. Men in front of you. Men behind you. And your body was moving on its own. Training worked, at least for that. You were moving without thinking. Your feet knew what to do, but your mind had stopped. The water was cold. When you jumped from the door, waist-deep water, the cold hit you like a wall. It was June, but the Atlantic was cold. The English Channel was cold. And that cold, that sudden, total, full-body cold, cut your breath. Breath. You'd forgotten to breathe. 1 second, 2 seconds. Your lungs screamed, and you breathed. Deep, involuntary, painful. Salt air, smoke, the smell of gunpowder. And you kept moving. The bottom was sand. Every step was a fight. 45 kilos on your back. Water to your waist. Waves pushing from behind, pulling from the front. You moved forward. Something happened to your left. You didn't look. You couldn't. Because looking meant stopping. Stopping meant being a target. Out in the open, in the water, slow, a target. And being a target meant you didn't look, but you heard it. And hearing was sometimes heavier than seeing. Seeing made things concrete, complete. Hearing left things unfinished. And the unfinished part, your imagination filled in. And that imagination was sometimes heavier than the real thing. You moved forward. The water was dropping, waist to hip to knee, a little less with every step. The shore was getting closer, and reaching the shore wasn't the finish line. Reaching the shore was where it really started, because past the shore was sand. Open sand, flat, no cover. And up on those high bluffs, in those concrete bunkers, there were machine guns. But the water was dropping, and that was good. That meant you were moving forward. You kept going. Your feet on sand. Real sand. No water anymore. Just sand. And weight. And sound. And fog. And the feeling of something sweeping down from above. That feeling all through your body. You hit the ground. They'd taught you in training. When you're exposed, get down. Stay small. Move. Stop. Move. Otherwise, you're a target. Otherwise, you're gone. You pressed into the sand. Your face went down into it. The sand was cold. Wet. Salt taste in your mouth. Was it blood? Seawater? Sand? You didn't try to figure it out. It didn't matter. You were breathing. That was enough for right now. Someone was next to you. You didn't know who. Couldn't see their face. But they'd come down. To your left. Close. And you could hear them breathing. 2 breaths. Yours. Theirs. Separate. But at the same time. On the same sand. In the same fog. In the same sound. That moment was strange in how real it felt. All night, since morning, everything had felt like a dream. The boat, the engine, the door, the water, the sound, all of it like you were somewhere else. But that breath was real. The breath next to you. You could hear it. and that sound pulled you into the present. Here, now, into the sand, into the cold, into what was real. You kept going. The officer's voice came. You couldn't see where he was. He disappeared into the fog, but his voice was there, and a voice meant movement. You got up. You ran. Your legs were heavy. Every step dug into the sand. 45 kilos shaking on your back. But you ran. Because stopping was heavier. Because stopping was thinking. Thinking was hearing those sounds. Hearing those sounds was freezing. Freezing was disappearing. You ran. While running, you saw things. You didn't try to see them, but you saw them. Things on the sand. Things in the water. You didn't look. You kept going. Because you had to keep going. When you reached the bluffs, you were gasping. Stone, concrete, a corner, a covered spot. Relatively. Only relatively. But that corner, that stone, that concrete, right now it felt like the best place on earth. You leaned against the wall. Your back felt the concrete. Hard, cold, real. And that cold, that hardness, snapped you fully into the present. Not somewhere else. Right here. You were alive. That thought turned over in your head. You were alive. So simple. Nobody thinks about being alive while they're living. But in that moment, that reality was the heaviest thing in the world. With its full weight. The man had made it. Jimmy, or Billy, or someone else. He'd made it. He was breathing hard. His face was covered in sand and salt and other things. But he was there. He looked at you. He didn't say anything. You didn't say anything. But that look spoke. It said, we're here. Both of us. Still. And that was enough. That, right now, was enough. The rest of the day dissolved into the fog. When you moved forward, when you stopped, which order you got, and when you got it, you couldn't remember. Maybe you didn't want to remember. Or maybe when you tried, your body pushed back. A protection. Some moments the body deceived itself, softened things, made them feel erased. But some things didn't erase. The sand didn't erase. The taste of salt didn't erase. Those 2 breaths didn't erase. Jimmy's or Billy's look didn't erase. And when evening came, when the sun went down without ever breaking through that fog, you were still there. And you didn't know exactly where. But you were in Normandy. You were on French soil. And you were alive. Small fires were forbidden. Cigarettes were forbidden. Light was forbidden. You sat in the dark, quietly. A group of men, exhausted, soaked, covered in sand, ears ringing from the sound. And in that silence, in that darkness, for the first time you thought about the day. The morning, the boat, the engine, the door, and that 1 second. The 1 second before the door opened. What had you been thinking in that second? Extra socks. You laughed. Quietly. A shaking, exhausted, uncontrolled laugh. The man next to you looked over. Then he laughed too. Without asking why. Because the why didn't matter. You just needed to laugh. Sometimes a person had to laugh. Otherwise, other things would start. And there was no room for other things right now. On that day, on Omaha Beach, 2,100 American soldiers lost their lives. You learned that number much later. Numbers sometimes hide the truth, big numbers especially. Because when you say 2,100, you don't hear 2,100 breaths stop in your head. You can't see 2,100 faces. You can't place 2,100 people who never made it home. Not all of them, not at once. But every one of those 2,100 was in a boat. Every one of them waited for that door. Every one of them took that first step into the cold water. Every one of them had something on their mind. A meal, a place, a name, a person. Something small, unimportant, real. And that small thing carried them to that beach. you survived. Why you? Why not them? You didn't want to ask that question. But it came. It came at night. It came in dreams. Sometimes it came in the daytime too, in unexpected moments, quietly. There was no answer. There couldn't be. And searching for one wouldn't bring them back. And the weight of not being able to bring them back, that enormous, uncarryable weight, would seep into the rest of your life. But right now, you were alive. And sometimes being alive was the only thing you had to do. Millions of pages were written about the largest amphibious operation in history. General Eisenhower's orders were written. Germany's defense plans were written. The Navy's coordinates were written. Historians wrote. Journalists wrote. Commanders wrote. But what it felt like to wait in that boat, that was never written. The moment the engine sound changed, never written. The moment the man next to you's stomach growled, never written. What passed through your mind in that 1 second before the door opened, never written. Extra socks, never written. Those were things you carried, and they were the heaviest part of all that great history, because documents are yellowed paper. Photographs blur. Orders get buried in the archives. But that cold, water to your waist, those two breaths, side by side, on the same sand, those are still somewhere. They're in you. This story is over. But that door is still opening somewhere. At every turning point in history, there's a boat. There's a door. And someone has to wait for that door. Someone whose name was never written down. Someone thinking about extra socks. Someone listening to the breath of the person next to them. In the next video, we're going to another door. That door is waiting for you too.